users, a very good morning to you once again. Welcome to Business Buzz on IUM Radio 94.5 FM, where we unpack the big forces shaping our economy and how they connect to your everyday life. My name is Rectangle, and today's conversation is one that hits close to home for each and every one of us in Africa and even the world beyond. Right? Now, for some context, here's the thing. When you switch on the news and hear about trade wars between global superpowers, oil price shocks, or even political standoffs between countries far away, it can feel like background noise, right? But the truth is that those shifts out there hit us right here in Namibia, from the cost of fuel and bread to whether small businesses can keep their doors open or not. Now, that's exactly why today's conversation is so important, right? Later this afternoon, IUM is hosting a public lecture titled Navigating the Storm, How Small Economies like Namibia Can Survive and Thrive Amid Geopolitical Shifts. The lecture kicks off at 3 p.m. at Lecture Hall 2, Tunana building, IUM main campus, Windhoek, and it's open to staff, students, and the general public at large. So tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, or even to tell an ex to come as well, right? Now, today we are honored to have the man leading that lecture right here with us on Business Buzz, Mr. Tom Alwendo, founder of Alvenco Advisory and former Minister of Mines and Energy. And he's here to help us break down how Namibia can prepare, adapt, and even thrive in uncertain times. Now, Mr. Alwendo also served as the Director General, if I'm not mistaken, of the National Planning Commission before his ascendance to the Ministry of Mines and Energy. Mr. Alwendo, thank you very much for taking your time to come and speak to IUM Radio. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and then I'm happy to be with you this morning.
All right, so let's get into our conversation, and first and foremost, let's discuss the personal impact, right? When young Namibians see headlines about global trade wars or economic tension, many wonder, how does this actually affect me? I mean, can you break it down for us? How do these big geopolitical shifts touch the life of ordinary Namibians, whether at the pump, on the job market, or at the supermarket? I mean, most of us just read about tariff wars, but we don't understand. So can you break it down for us?
Thank you very much, Kudumo. And then again, let me say good morning to all your listeners. As you have said, we as a Namibia, as small as we are, we might think that we are far away from some of these things that are happening. As you mentioned, whether it's the war between Russia and the Ukraine,
yes,
or whether it's what's happening with Israel and Palestine. Geographically, that's kind of like far away from us, and therefore it's like, why should I even worry about it?
Why should I even care about it?
Why should I really care about it? But the point is this. I think in this era, where I think we are so interconnected, distance is no longer really a matter. What happened today is going to affect us. For example, as you just mentioned, just imagine you wake up one day and you hear that because of the war between some superpowers, the Panama Canal, for example, can no longer be operating, where most of the ships go through that canal to distribute food stuff globally. And if that happens, suddenly we are also affected because, number one, the amount of food that we need to import through some of those routes are no longer available. You also mentioned the fact that, if there's a war between, oil-producing countries, for example, suddenly the fuel is no longer, the supply of fuel is no longer enough for everybody else, and therefore people start to ration those fuels. And as a small country, you are likely to be the one to get the least amount of fuel, and therefore we are not an island. As much as we are far away from some of those hotspots, and therefore we need to be concerned about what's happening and figure out what we're going to do. And my thesis is to say we might be small, but we are not entirely powerless.
Okay.
Definitely not. I
So
mean,
we
there
have
are certain
influence.
strategies that we can actually embrace to make sure that we do continue to thrive as small as we are.
So does this mean that we eh, um as a small nation like Namibia, do we have influence? I mean, in influencing, for example, the price of gas.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think the question, the issue is this,
Mhm.
Kudumo. Inherently, small states, small nations
Mhm.
like ours, we have got certain vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Not because of our smallness, but not because it's something because unique to Namibia, for example. Just the fact that you are this small economy and that there are certain vulnerabilities. For example,
Mhm.
um, in small nations, most of the time you got too much economic concentration.
Okay.
Like in Namibia, for example, the economy is basically concentrated on, say, for example, mining sectors and exploitation of raw minerals. You have got a smaller population as well in terms that your consumption volume is such that it's not enough for you to grow your economy, and therefore you rely on external market for you to be able to survive.
Mhm.
And those are really vulnerability that inherent to small nations. But again, as I said, we can influence because there are also certain things that we are good at. For example,
Okay.
Namibia, I think, since independence, I think we are regarded as one of the democratic nations where our constitution is well regarded worldwide.
Mhm.
And therefore, we can basically leverage on that to say, look, we are a democratic elected, a democratic country, and therefore we are able then to link up with the external world so that at least we can sell our goods because our market is too small. We can go to other people.
Mhm.
We can also leverage on our natural beauty. I mean, Namibia is always known to be really one of those countries that has really got, as like we say, in a land of contrast. And therefore, our natural beauty is such that we can really leverage on that, where we can actually expand our tourism industry, for example.
Mhm.
So those are some of the things, and I also talk about our mineral wealth to make sure that at least we make sure that our mineral wealth work for us. As much as we might have to share with others, it's really most and foremost actually going to be leveraged to help us as a country, as an economy.
Mm.
So some of those things actually we can leverage off, and therefore for us not to feel that we are powerless because we are small. So our smallness should not really be regarded as a destiny, because there are certain things we can do to leverage on that.
All right. I'll get back to that question a bit later on as well. Now, let's also look at the students' perspective. I mean, since the uh, the public lecture will be held at IUM, and that's a university, and most probably there will be students among the audience. Now, for the university students listening right now who are worried about job prospects after graduation, how do these global changes create new opportunities for young Namibians? Are there perhaps any skills or careers that they should be preparing for today that didn't exist a decade ago?
Um, yeah, as you said, there's a public lecture this afternoon, and I hope that as many students as possible will be able to attend and actually ask questions as well after the public lecture.
Mm-hmm.
But these global changes, uh, they are not necessarily going to offer us new opportunities per se.
Okay.
They might offer new opportunity for us, but only if we've got a strategy to take advantage of whatever is being offered as a country. And therefore, as a country, there are certain things that we need to do so that at least our students then will be able then to do what needs to be done. For example, I sometimes think we think that because we are a mineral-rich country,
Mm-hmm.
that is what's going to make us happen.
Mm.
I would argue that our richness is not really in the minerals that we have got.
Okay.
Our richness really lie in the people. especially the young people,
And the skills.
in the skills.
Uh-huh.
Those students in our lecture halls, those students in our campuses, that's really where our richness lie.
Okay.
Because you could have all these natural resources, but if you don't have the skills, the required skill to be able to leverage on those minerals,
Mm-hmm.
you could probably not really gain much out of it. You rely on other people to be the one to do that for you because you don't have the required skills. And therefore, my message probably to the student is to say, yes, as a country, there are these things we need to do, but you, as students, you need to really concentrate and follow the global issues, how things are changing. As you say, some of the jobs that we knew like 10 years ago, those jobs are no longer existing.
Mm-hmm.
And that trend will continue, unfortunately. Or
Unfortunately.
fortunately. It won't change.
Mm-hmm.
For example, now we are talking about AI,
Automation.
almost everything is
Mm-hmm.
actually done, on the internet. And therefore, the skills we need really, we need to probably look at our curriculum, what we teach at our schools, and what we teach at our universities, to take advantage of what's happening. To sit back and cry how things are changing and how we are going to be left behind, unfortunately, is not a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
The strategy is to say, let's make sure that our curriculum, for example, talk about coding, how do we code?
Mm-hmm.
You talk about critical thinking.
Uh-huh.
You talk about environmental sensitivities, because that's also one of the things that actually going to derail what's happening. So those are the real things I think young people should concentrate on to make sure that we do have the requisite skills to be able then to leverage our natural wealth that we might have, as I said, like minerals.
All right. Now let's discuss the reality for small businesses in Namibia, right? Let's zoom in on small businesses. For the shop owner in Katutura or the emerging farmer in the north, when trade policies change or uncertainty rocks global markets, how can these everyday entrepreneurs protect themselves and even benefit from the shifts?
I think it's an important part of what I'm going to be actually discussing during the lecture hall, to say, because of the vulnerability I talk about of small states, you find that globally the trading systems, globalist trading systems, are usually influenced by the bigger powers. And small nations usually just take what is given. Because during the negotiations, you don't always have much leverage to actually influence those trade negotiations. And what you end up having is a system where some of these international trading systems do favor powerful nations, powerful economies. As a small and medium entrepreneur in Namibia, then, for example, what do I do about that? There's an opportunity that with the technology that have opened up, there is now also an opportunity where SMEs can offer their product, their services, to do that online, something that might not have been available before. The other thing also, what I would want to argue is to say, maybe we don't have to so much lament the unfairness of the global trading systems. What we need to start to do is to really enhance or speed up the process of regional integration, where we start as African, we start to trade with each other. And if that happens, we might then have to rely less on global international trading system and to be able to trade within ourselves. And I think that's where SMEs can also start to concentrate by leveraging the technology, and also for us to make sure that we also do trade within ourselves. And as I was saying, unfortunately, because of the smallness of our economy, we cannot really think of economies of scale. And therefore, if I'm an SME, I really have to be able to find some market outside the economy, because if I only concentrate on the local economy, that might, yes, good for me just for that world, but I mean for you to be able to grow. Because as SMEs, let's not just want to be SMEs all the time. You want to graduate. And the only way to graduate is to be able to then leverage the technology and also identify markets outside our own local markets.
All right. Now, let's discuss practical preparation. And for someone listening right now, whether they're a student, a parent, or running a small shop, what are 3 practical things they can do today to prepare for and benefit from these global changes?
Yeah. Now, it's as an individual entrepreneur or as an individual student, there's little to say, well, I'm going to prepare this as a student or as an entrepreneur. But I think what we need to concentrate on is to have a strategy as a country. Because we all live in this country, and therefore if we have got a good strategy how to thrive amidst all these turbulences that are happening, then I think our entrepreneurs and our students will be able then also to figure out how then to benefit from what we as a country have prepared ourselves. And therefore I can think of 4 practical preparations that we must do.
Okay.
Because of all this global tension, I think we, as Namibia, we need to continue to make sure that our foreign policy is not based on so much on ideological, lines, but rather on our own interest, where we balance our interests, and therefore we do not get caught up into siding with that or the other, but rather promoting our own self-interest as a country. And that might even require us to establish some other relationship with outside the traditional partners that we have had, for example, in the past. The second preparation that we need to do is really to make sure that we diversify the economy and not to continuously rely on the primary sectors of the economy. But we really need to go to the secondary sector where we can actually use the primary sector as input into the secondary sectors, so that at least you can have manufacturing jobs, you can have surface jobs, and not to continue just exporting raw materials. The third one is really regional integration, as I was saying. We really need to integrate ourselves in the region so that we can start trading within the region.
Apologies for that delay. So we had the technical glitches that we are trying to sort out. Before we get into the business of the day, may I get confirmation from our online community if they can hear us quite well? Colleagues online, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Shadapo.
Can hear you?
Afternoon. Yes, we can hear you.
That's good.
We can hear.
Okay, that's good. Then a good afternoon to all of
Good
us.
afternoon, we can hear you, Doc.
Okay, thank you very much. A very good afternoon to all of us here in the physical venue and online. Yes, we are very much pleased as IUM to host you this afternoon in the name of a public lecture, the first of the series of our public lectures that we continue to have. So if you were to be asked today to state the state of the Namibian economy today, would you say we are on the growth, we are on the recovery, we are declining, or we are stable? Which of those questions will you give? And what are the reasons that are behind any of those options? So this is just questions that I'm throwing to all of us so that as we are going to engage with the presentation, so we need to bear in mind that the central theme that we are dealing with here is the economy. So thank you very much for making time and be with us for the public lecture. And we are really grateful in our midst to have the Honorable Alwendo, to come and give us useful insights on how Namibia as a nation, as a small economies, as a developing countries can thrive amid geopolitical tensions that we are trying to encounter or that we are continuing to encounter from time to time. So this is a public lecture that is both conducted physically here. We are having a fairly good representation, and I understand our colleagues are still arriving. Some of them were having classes, and they are still parting ways with the students, and students are still arriving. And we have quite a very good number of online audience, and we are really grateful for their presence. So I am Elok Shkalepo, the Director of Postgraduate Studies and Research, and I have the honor and privilege to direct the proceedings of today's public lecture. Naturally, it used to be a 2-hour session, meaning that all the deliberations that we are going to do can fit within that time frame. But the main idea is to ignite debates and continue further collaborations and networking. So for us, a session such as this one is just a starting point. So once the presentation is made, we are going to have engagement discussions beyond that. So we are having a very short, impactful program that we are going to follow. Whereas in the first in the first item, we are having the welcoming remarks that we are going to be given by Professor Charles Makanyeza, who is our PVC for Academic Affairs, Research and Innovation. And then once we have received the welcoming remarks, then we are going to go to the next item, the introduction of the presenter, so that we really get to know Honorable Tommy Alwendo. And they are going to be given that item by Dr. Jaba, who is our Dean for the Faculty of Strategic Management and Business Administration. And after the presenter is introduced, then he is going to give us his useful and impactful insights on how best we can navigate tensions as a developing economies. And then there will be a discussion following the presentation that I'm going to lead, and then concluding remarks that we are going to be given by Dr. Blessing, who is our acting director in the IUM Graduate School of Business. So without further ado, I would therefore now like to call upon on stage Professor Charles Makanyeza, who is our Prof. Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Research and Innovation, to welcome the audience to the public lecture series. Prof. Makanyeza, you may please come and take the podium.
Thank you so much, Director of Proceedings, Dr. Shkalepo. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We can hear you very well. We can hear you very well. On behalf of the IUM Governing Council, management, staff and students, it is my singular honor to stand before you, welcoming you to this august public lecture. Dear audience, here present and attending virtually, as mentioned by the Director of Proceedings, that we are equally represented, equally and well represented online. So thank you so much, colleagues online. I got to see my colleagues there. Dr. Chombala, I heard your voice there. Thank you so much for attending virtually, even though I wanted you to be here to support me. But thank you so much. I humbly and sincerely welcome you to this public lecture entitled Navigating the Storm. I believe we have witnessed a storm. You know, a storm is not something that is easy. But some people say when you are driving and you meet a storm, don't stop. Go against it. Right? Otherwise, if you stop, it is going to consume you. It will disappear. So the title of the public lecture is called Navigating the Storm: How Small Economies like Namibia Can Survive and Thrive Amid Geopolitical Shifts. So some things are happening. I think we've been seeing things, observing things around the world. So the topic of this public lecture is of paramount importance, especially in the 21st century, where the economic environment is characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which some people call VUCA, which is VUCA. The economic environment, the operating environment is very complex and is huge. Even as businesses, you operate in this unpredictable environment, and then yes, you have to really know what you are doing. Colleagues, I also see our founder and chairman of the IUM Governing Council is here present, face to face. Welcome, Prof. Honorable Professor Dave Namant. Maybe the people who might want to see you can wave your hand there, Prof. Thank you so much for attending in person. Thank you so much. We value your presence here. So the war in Ukraine, Palestine, and so forth, I think we've heard these are buzzwords. Ukraine, Palestine, the Middle East, and so forth. And of course, of late, we've heard about Trump administration. I think the moment you go on Google, you try to type something that starts with a T, already artificial intelligence completes for yourself. You see Trump coming in, Trump administration, tariffs, we see counter-offensive measures, and so forth. And I tell you, it's very active, it's volatile. So this public lecture serves as a firm reminder to us all that the world is changing at an unprecedented pace in all facets, most notably in terms of the pastel, the political environment, the economic environment, social, cultural, technological, ecological, and legal environment. You see changes taking place here. And this is a broader environment, especially when it comes to planning, when it comes to strategic planning, even at the national level. And this dynamic environment brings about opportunities and challenges for both large economies and small economies such as Namibia. Like any other developing country that is on the trajectory to map its development agenda, Namibia is no exception. And we are aware we recently promulgated the 6th National Development Plan, which is NPD 6. This is a very good example of national planning that takes place in Namibia. So as the saying goes, the world is a global village. No country is exempt from tensions surfacing on the global stage. Tensions in other parts of the world is characterized by trade and investment embargoes, technological disruptions, and climate change effects have ripple effects on all corners of the globe, including Namibia. Unfortunately, when elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. I think you have heard about this, Yes. So if we are to borrow from that, when powerful economies are in conflict, the weak and vulnerable economies are the ones that are going to suffer. So as Trump and his administration there, they are fighting China, they are fighting Russia and so forth. Who is going to suffer? It's the smaller economies like Namibia. And this is very, very serious, colleagues. This is very, very serious. Given this set reality, developing countries like Namibia need to position themselves strategically to survive and thrive within these geopolitical shifts. So this public lecture offers us the opportunity to engage with critical questions such as how can Namibia maintain economic stability in the face of global volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity? What mechanisms can Namibia institute to weather the storm and thrive in the long term? What lessons can we learn from other small economies that have managed to turn vulnerability into strength? And remember, we say necessity is the mother of invention. And this also reminds me about the paradox of Africa, where it is said Africa is very rich in natural resources, but its people are poor. I think you need to go and investigate there. Africa is rich, very rich in natural resources, but its people are what? Are poor. And it is known that when the West developed, when Europe developed, yes, in fact, I wanted to say they stole, but it is said they took resources from where? From Africa. When America developed, they also took resources from where? From Africa. When the Asian nations developed, it is also believed that in their master plan, they also had a strategic initiative there to say where resources are in short supply within our country, there is a place somewhere in the world where we are going to get what? Resources. And this place is called what? It's called Africa. And if you look around, you see many people from other continents in the African countries that are also tapping into our valuable resources. And where are they taking these resources? Their countries to develop what? Their nations. So it's a sad reality. So such questions can help us chart the way forward to navigate the storm, to achieve the Namibia that we want. Our speaker for today, Honorable Tom Alwendo, who will be introduced to you shortly, brings a wealth of expertise and insight to these pressing issues, given his extensive experience and exposure to matters of economic growth. And I'm confident that the public lecture we are about to engage in, along with the subsequent discussions, will provoke thoughtful debates instrumental in shaping our way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to thank all of you for your presence and willingness to participate in dialogues on this maniac and contemporary matters, such as these that we are going to address in this public lecture. You have made the right decision to be with us today. And with these few remarks, I officially welcome all of you to this public lecture. May it be enriching, thought-provoking, and inspiring to us all. God bless you. IUM loves you. And thank you, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Makanyeza. So that was so inspiring and enlightening. He said, you have made the right choice to be here with us today. So thank you so much. Now, all of us should feel welcomed at home and in the IUM family. So in his welcoming remarks, Professor cited the NDP 6. We are lucky today because the Honorable Tom Alwendo is the architect of the NDPs in Namibia. So how lucky are we today? And You also said the famous quotation that when elephants are fighting, what suffers? Yeah, so the public lecture for today is to enlighten us on how best can we prevent ourselves from suffering miserably. Yes, I do not want to go into the merits of the welcome remarks, but indeed inspiring and enlightening. Thank you so much, Prof. Okay, now in terms of our program, the next item is the introduction of the presenter. So without further ado, I would like to call upon on the podium Dr. Shiharen Njaba, who is our Dean for the Faculty of Strategic Management and Business Administration, to introduce and present our guest speaker to the podium. Dr. Njaba, you may please take the podium.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ceremony, for the opportunity to introduce our guest. It's a challenge to introduce somebody whose name is a household name, and most of us here probably know him better than the introduction I'm going to give. Allow me to stand by the protocol that was wrote by the area speakers, and that would also be considered for the sake of time. But nevertheless, I would just like to say one word to appreciate the presence of the founder, the chair of the governing council of IUM. We feel that with his presence here, we are given good encouragement to attend such big and enriching events in our institution. Dear members of the audience, I am delighted and feel honored to introduce and present to you our guest presenter for today in the person of Honorable Tom Alwendo. Honorable Tom Alwendo has a long career in public service. He served as a deputy governor of the Bank of Namibia, the Central Bank of Namibia, between 1993 to 1996. He then served as the governor of the Bank of Namibia between 1997 and 2010. Among some of his achievements during this tenure at the Bank of Namibia are the establishment of the local currency, the Namibian dollar, the localization of the payments and banking systems, and the establishment of the Financial Intelligence Center. Between 2010 to 2017, Honorable Tom Alwendo served as a Director General of the National Planning Commission, NPC. The NPC is a constitutional body tasked with the responsibility of planning the priorities and direction of national development. As Director General of the National Planning Commission, he presided over the drafting of Namibia's fourth National Development Plan, NDP4. The NDP4 prioritized specific economic sectors that are perceived to have more potential to grow the economy and provide employment opportunities. Over the course of NDP4 period, the Namibian economy grew on average at 5.7%. Very good performance. He served as Minister of Mines and Energy between April 2018 to March 2025. As Minister of Mines and Energy, he prioritized the competitiveness of the mining and energy sectors and value addition to minerals before they are exported in raw form. He was consistent in urging investors in the mining and energy sectors to operate in a manner where they earn their license to operate. It is also during his tenure as Minister of Mines and Energy, during which several oil and gas discoveries were made in Namibia. His motto is that with ordinary talent and extraordinary perseverance, all things are attainable. What a powerful motto. He holds a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, South Africa, and a Master's in Business Administration, MBA, from the University of Wales, United Kingdom. He is the current chairman of Alvenco Advisory. Alvenco Advisory is an impact-driven advisory firm that he has founded in Namibia, providing impactful advisory services in the areas of public-private partnerships, structuring and facilitation, sustainable investment and ECG strategy, risk advisory and regulatory compliance, stakeholder alignment, and policy advocacy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and welcome Honorable Tom Alwendo to the podium. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Njaba, for that introduction. As you were introducing, when you say I started at the bank in 1993, I can see everybody having their calculation, trying to figure out how old is he now. Well, I'll tell you at the end of my presentation. You don't have to worry about that. But I really just want to say thank you very much, Pro Vice Chancellor Makanyeze, Founder Dr. Namandi, good to see you, and all the academic staff, and then the public online. I'm happy to be here this afternoon. Really just to share some very important, what I think is very important issues pertaining to our countries. And as it was said, I think the theme of the public lecture is just about, as the small economies, amidst all what's happening around globally, how do we behave as a country to make sure that we do not drown because of all these storms. So it's a very important issue. And let me begin by just stating something that I believe is really profound. And that is that we are not, as a country, we are not as an island. We're not living as an island. Because we are now living in a world where local is global, and what used to be a distance, that distance is really just an illusion today. We may be, for example, be geographically distant from some of the big epicenters of the global conflict, the war of Ukraine and Russia was mentioned, for example. However, in this age of instant communication, in this age of tightly linked markets and transnational challenges, we are not really immune, even when we think we are that far. As I mentioned, the war in Ukraine affects our food prices in more ways than we care to admit. A trade dispute, for example, between the United States and what is happening now and China, that dispute will shift investment flows across the globe, just because of that, and we will be included. Rising global interest rate constrain our external borrowing capacities. We talk about the fuel prices going up and down. Some of you, I remember when I was the Minister of Mines and Energy, every now and then when we had to announce the price changes, people thought Tom Alwendo just woke up one day and he said, I'm going to increase the price. No, I didn't. It's simply what was happening in the world. So we may be small, but we are not really invisible. We may be distant, but we are not disconnected. It is therefore necessary that we understand these challenges, and more importantly, we must not only understand the challenges, but we must begin to sketch a practical plan forward for our country. A path not based on fear, perhaps, or idealism, but a path one rooted in clarity. We need to be clear what it is we want to do. A path rooted in resolve and also in unity. So even from afar, the storm touches us all, and let us therefore be ready to sail that storm and not to allow ourselves to sink. Now, it is not an understatement that we are living through a historic turning point. The post-Cold War consensus that was built around, for example, globalization as we know it, liberal democracy and multilateralism, that consensus today is under serious strain. We are therefore living at a geopolitical crossroad where yesterday's certainties has become today's chaos. Now, I can think of 4 major trends that defines this new era of chaos. The first trend is that we are now living in a fractured global order. There was a time when international cooperation was a given. Today is no longer the case. Because today we are witnessing global institutions that are weakened. Permanent members of the United Security Council, for example, as we know them, are openly in conflict. Before they might be in conflict, but you never really saw that conflict, but currently they are openly in that conflict. And for countries like ours, this means we now have fewer predictable rules and more power politics. The second trend is that today we are witnessing economic nationalism and strategic rivalries. You can think rivalries ranging from cheap wars to see who will dominate the AI space. As we know, AI is now dominating the space. Think about rare earth to economic sanctions. Today, economics tools are now being used as geopolitical weapons. And if we are not vigilant, we may find our strategic resources that we have them. We may find those resources caught up in the crossfire of the greater power rivalries between developed countries. The third trend is that technological fragmentation is on the increase. We all use internet, for example, but the internet is no longer as we knew it yesterday. It has now become more and more fragmented. Think of, for example, the computing standards that are emerging in AI. People talk about 5G. And think about digital finance, for example, that is almost everywhere. If we do not prepare well as a country, we risk being locked into systems that may not serve our long-term interests. And you might have also heard where countries want to come in and provide us systems, but will those systems serve our long-term interests, or are they likely just to put us in conflict with other countries? The fourth imperative or trend is that we are now witnessing recurring climate and demographic pressures. And as the global south continues to grow in population, and also as climate stress accelerates globally, we'll continue to see increasing pressure on food systems, pressure on water and migration. And Namibia is part of this dynamic, unfortunately. So we will either prepare now or face compounding crisis later. So
The world has changed, and we cannot afford to only react, but to really to start responding with eyes wide open and our feet firmly planted on the ground. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to understand how Namibia can position itself strategically in this rapidly changing world, we must first acknowledge the structural vulnerabilities that confront small states like ours. And mind you, these vulnerabilities do not stem, for example, from a lack of aspiration on our part or potential, but these vulnerabilities really from the limitation inherent in size, in economic structure, and international influence. First, we face the challenge of economic concentration in Namibia, which leaves our national income and employment prospects heavily dependent on a narrow set of sectors and export products. Our economy, for example, relies significantly on the extraction and the export of primary commodities such as you know, minerals like diamonds and uranium. And while these sectors do generate substantial revenue for the state and for all of us, they are also highly susceptible to global price volatility and external demand shocks. For example, a sudden dip in commodity price, for example of gold or uranium, or a slowdown in a major trading partner economy, being China, the European Union, for example, or even South Africa, that can ripple through our economy, affecting our government's revenue, employment, and cost of living. You may recall, for example, not long ago, because of the price of uranium, that really dropped from $70 per pound to about $20. Some of the uranium mine had to close simply because of that price decrease. So this concentration limits our ability to build a resilient middle class, which is critical for long-term economic stability. Second vulnerability I can think of is that we grapple with limited bargaining power in international affairs. We as a country, we are a respected member of the international community. And I think over the years we have long demonstrated diplomatic competence. But yet, in many multilateral forums and trade negotiations, small states like ours, unfortunately, often find ourselves on the receiving end of decisions that were really made by larger powers. And when global financial institutions impose reforms, or when global trade rules shift to favor developed economies, our influence is rather marginal, not really much how we can influence those outcomes of discussions. And we are frequently forced to adapt to frameworks in which we really had little to say. And this asymmetry in global governance structure leaves us with fewer tools to defend our interest when global dynamic shifts. A third and critical vulnerability lies in our dependence on external finance. As we know, much of our development is supported by, for example, foreign direct investment, concessional finance, and sometimes donor aid. Now, while these sources of funding have been essential in expanding our infrastructure, for example, our healthcare or education, they also come with constraints. For example, interest rate hikes in the United States or maybe Europe. That hike will raise the cost of borrowing for our countries like ours if we had to rely on borrowing from those markets. Also, shifting donor priorities, whether towards conflict zones or global health emergencies, can leave us with funding gaps. Not long ago, when the US decided to cut US aid, we also know how many African countries had to struggle with where they're going to get some funds to continue with some of the health issues they were dealing with. And also foreign direct investment, which is very important and is vital for our economy.
unfortunately in our country, that FDI is usually concentrated in extractive industries, for example, in the mining sectors, and they not always contribute to local value chains or skills transfer. That is really a very important ingredient on the long-term sustainability of our economy. Now, these vulnerabilities are compounded by our small domestic market. And that small domestic market limits economies of scale for local businesses, and also it reduces internal buffers against external shocks. We also know that our population is relatively sparse, and much of our territory is arid and difficult to cultivate. And unfortunately, this limits both our agricultural productivity and also domestic demand. As a result, Namibia is more exposed to import inflation because most of the things we use are imported. We're exposed to food insecurity and supply chain disruptions than larger, more diversified economies. But with all those vulnerabilities, it is important to emphasize that vulnerability in itself should not be our destiny. Structural constraint can be mitigated. So this can be mitigated or even transformed through foresight, through innovation, and deliberate policy choices. The real key in this lies not in us lamenting our size, complaining about how small we are, but in leveraging our strategic advantages to forge a more sustainable development path. And some of those advantages are, for example, our geopolitical stability, mineral wealth, as I mentioned, natural beauties, and constitutionally grounded democracy. Those are some of the advantages we have, and we can leverage on those. And we know history that offers ample proof that small states are not condemned to perpetual fragility. I can think of countries, for example, like Singapore. They are probably much smaller than us. I can think about Costa Rica, I can think about Mauritius. They are much smaller than us, but somehow they were able to deal with those vulnerabilities inherent in small nations. So Namibia can and must do the same. But it will require hard choices. It will require coherent leadership from all of us. And most of all, it will require a shared national commitment to move beyond short-term fixes, like sometimes you want to do, and toward long-term structural transformation. So again, we may be small, but let us also remember that we are not inherently powerless. There are certain things we can do for ourselves. Now, let's talk about those things that we can do. Now, for a small state in this global volatile system, we need a strategy. And strategy is not a luxury. It is really an existential necessity. We need to have it. We cannot afford to drift on the tides of geopolitics just because it's happening somewhere else. We must row with the deliberation, we must row with vision, and with coordination. We must respond to the vulnerabilities of a small state geopolitics, not sometimes we're so scared because we are so small. So we cannot do that with fear, but we can do that with thoughtful, determined actions. We need to be deliberate, and there must be action. Now, strategic survival means doing what we can and doing so consistently, in a very consistent manner. Not to do this today and tomorrow we'll change and then go somewhere else, but we need to be consistent in what it is we need to do. We need to be deliberate, and we also need to be courageous. Courageous is very, very important because as much as we want to do, there are certain people or certain countries that will probably tell us that that's not what we need to do. So we need to be courageous in pursuing that strategy that we have come for ourselves. Now, here are 5 key imperatives that I believe we must pursue. And I believe if we can really do this, we will survive some of this turmoil. The first one I can think of is that we need to root our foreign policy in principle and pragmatism. Our foreign policy must be rooted in principle and pragmatism. And this means that we must continue to uphold our non-aligned and principled foreign policy posture that we have followed over the years. And we should not align ourselves based sometimes on geopolitical pressure, but on national interest and on shared values. This may require us to expand our diplomatic relationship beyond traditional partners. Because in these things, sometimes people say we are friends, but they are friends because they also got their own national interest. And therefore we need to align ourselves because of our national interest, but not because of some geopolitical pressures. We can also take leadership in specific global discussions where we have earned credibility. For example, our record in wildlife management, wildlife conservation, gives us really, I believe, a standing to lead on global biodiversity frameworks. Another one, for example, our upcoming green hydrogen developments, that I think really we have done a lot of work to make sure that we are now visible in terms of our ability to do this. That can also put ourselves in a position and authority to shape the discussion on clean energy transitions in the global south, not only in the region, but in the global south. Also at the multilateral level, we must become more assertive in alliances like the African Union, for example, or within SADC, where we should actively propose resolutions, where we hold summits on climate and trade and push for African-led reform, especially for institutions like the World Bank and IMF. The second imperative is that we need to build a more inclusive and diversified economy. And here I want to say that economic resilience requires breaking our dependence on a few export commodities, like I mentioned. It's really about minerals. We must therefore create a more dynamic economy, one that adds value at home, supports broad-based employment, and also that opens global markets for our goods and services. We can do so, for example, by incentivizing local value addition through tax incentives. We create industrial zones. For example, rather than simply exporting lithium or rare earth, Namibia should build or co-invest in battery component plants, for example. Government can offer reduced tax or subsidized land leases for such investments. For example, conditional on skills training and technology transfer. As long as there's training and there's technology transfer such that in the future we do this in ourselves. We must also reduce bureaucratic red tape that we know it can really choke SMEs. For example, one would think of a one-stop digital portal for business registration, where you can also do your tax filing, where you can also do your licensing. That will save entrepreneurs a lot of time and money. And targeted microfinance program for women and youth-led businesses must be scaled. We do have some, but I think we need to continue to scale those with businesses mentorship as a condition for access to those facilities. At the very same time, the government must provide clear, transparent rules that continue to attract investment while also protecting our national interest. While doing that, let's also remember that over-regulation discourages innovation. When you over-regulate sectors, you can also discourage innovation. But just as well as under-regulation can invite exploitations. So you cannot live without regulation. You must have some smart regulations. The third one is that we need to deepen our African regional integration. Because in the age of fragmented global trade, Africa must realize that we need to start to trade with ourselves. And Namibia must be at the center of this renaissance. at the center of this newly emerging where we believe that we can do it within ourselves. Because our economic destiny is African, and we must really act accordingly, and not always to think that our economic destiny is somehow outside the continent. For example, we must continue to invest in infrastructure that connects us to our neighbors, completing and maintaining transport corridors such as we know, the Trans-Kalahari and the Walvis Bay, Ndola, Lubumbashi routes. These routes will reduce logistics costs and will also make Namibia a gateway to the continent, enabling that integration that I spoke about. At the policy level, we should harmonize standards and regulatory frameworks with our SADC neighbors, for instance. Why not create common product safety standards or have mutual recognition of veterinary certification when you export our beef, for example, or when you trade in agricultural goods, so that we don't have certification, each country having their own certification, but you get one certification, for example, in the SADC region. That will really help with the integration. Namibia should also champion regional education and research programs. Similar to, I know, for example, the EU have what they call the Erasmus schemes. This will enable African students and researchers to move easily across borders to collaborate and innovate with their peers in the region and on the continent. The fourth and last one of the imperative, which I think we need to do, is reform and strengthening of public institutions. Because we all know that strong institutions are the backbone of any stable and responsive state. And reform must always begin with the civil service, for example, in our country. And in this regard, I am inspired and really filled with hopefulness because after I listened to our President, Her Excellency Netumbo Ndaitwah, articulating her vision of our civil service, as you remember when she addressed public servants earlier this year, she emphasized civil servants' critical role in bridging government policies with citizens and delivering essential services that are guided by values of pragmatism, let's do what we work, by integrity, accountability, meritocracy, and inclusive. Therefore, we really need a merit-based civil servant recruitment system underpinned by regular public exams and also performance review. And positions in the civil service should be filled based only on capabilities and not on connections, on competency and not on the time spent in the civil service. Sometimes people say, well, I spent 10 years here, therefore it's my turn to be promoted. That should not be the criteria. It should be about how capable am I to be able to occupy this position. And also to strengthen public trust, we must radically increase transparency. For example, the government could consider launching a live policy, publicly accessible dashboard of national budget allocation and expenditure. And these days with ICT it's very, very easy to do that. And we can update it on a monthly basis so that the public can follow as to what it is we are doing. We also need to think about, I think we have also heard about how we can build up the procurement, especially in the public space, that procurement reform is also urgent. We can consider a centralized digital procurement platform where tenders, for example, are published. They are also evaluated on the same platform, and they are also awarded transparently, and where we can also then have audit trails that can be accessible to oversight bodies and the media. We also need to prioritize human capital and innovation. Because sometimes we think, erroneously so, we think that our greatest asset is underground. We think it's our minerals, for example, or we think it's our energy resources. It is not. In my view, our greatest asset is really in our classrooms. Those kids in our classrooms. It's in our lecture hall like this. We therefore need to overhaul our education to prioritize applied learning, Curriculum updates should integrate coding, climate literacy, digital skills, financial education, and above all, critical thinking. If you are not able to think critically about things and basically just be told things that we agree or we believe, that won't take us far, and therefore critical thinking is very, very important. To also attract and retain talent, which we need to retain, we must invest in research. Institutions like the IUM, for example, and all the other universities, let's ask ourselves, what sort of research do we do, and to what extent is that research being used to promote whatever strategy we have as a country going forward? The government should offer seed grants to universities and innovation hubs, working with climate-smart agriculture, maybe renewable energy, health technology, and indigenous knowledge systems. Finally, youth must be meaningfully involved in shaping national priorities. For example, I'm thinking that each ministry could establish a youth advisory panel, for example. This will ensure that the voice of the next generation is heard and not just acknowledged. Sometimes it's happened. These 5 strategic imperatives, namely foreign policy balance, economic diversification, regional integration, institutional strength, and human capital, these, in my view, really form a holistic agenda that we can pursue. They are not a shopping list, but an integrated national strategy for resilience that we need to have. However, fortunately or unfortunately, these require us to think long term. It requires us to coordinate across ministry and sectors and to place nation before faction. Because in the end, strategy is the only true expression of sovereignty. But it will, however, require us to be bold enough to chart our own course and to be disciplined enough to stay the path. As I said, sometimes we have a strategy, but every other year or every other 5 years we change, and therefore we get confused exactly to where we are going. But we need to have discipline to stay that course. And as we pursue these strategic imperatives, let us also remember that no national vision can succeed in a climate of division, in a climate of mistrust, and in a climate of political grandstanding. To successfully pursue these strategic imperatives, unity among Namibians is not optional. It is not optional, but rather it is foundational. That will require us to resist the temptation to always politicize every challenge or reduce every difference of opinion to a partisan contest. Because development demands constructive collaboration, it demands not rhetorical point scoring. And in a smaller country like ours, every voice matters. All our voices matters. However, it's only when those voices really do sing in harmony, not dissonance. Otherwise, if you all sing in different tones, there will just be chaos. So if we do that, progress can be possible. Let us therefore set aside really our narrow agendas and come together as Namibians. Only united by shared purpose, bound by the promise of our constitutions, and really committed to building a future greater than the sum of our individual interests. And if anything, strategy is not about scale. Strategy is all about willpower. Strategy is all about clarity and executions. Without execution, that strategy is meaningless. Before I conclude, I want to turn to what I believe is the heart of our survival strategy. And it is not policy. It is not funding. But rather, it is character. What character do we want to have? It is easy to believe that survival is a matter of size, or maybe wealth, or perhaps just be lucky. But I submit to you that the survival of any state, especially small states like ours, is ultimately a question of leadership, a question of imagination, and a question of moral courage. And leadership is not about pleasing everyone. As some of those of us who have been in those positions, we know you can't please everybody. It is about seeing clearly, deciding firmly, and acting ethically. Whether it is perhaps phasing out inefficient subsidy that we offer to our SOEs, for example, or perhaps standing up to corrupt interest, or investing in youth of a short-term popularity. We must be willing to make difficult decisions in the service of long-term prosperity. Our challenges are too great to be solved by government alone. Sometimes we think it's government. Yes, government has got a role to play. We need a coalition of the willing. We need civil society that holds power accountable. We need private sector that drives innovations and jobs. We need academia that guides policy with research and insight. And we need youth that challenges us to think boldly and differently. Finally, we must have the courage to believe in our own capacity. There is a temptation always in small countries to wait for donor supports or to wait for